Good morning, or depending when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and I've always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio, and World 2014 has happened. Champions have been crowned, good times have been had. I have missed out, but I will be there next year, where I don't know more about that in a minute. But what we're going to be talking about today is, quite frankly, all of the cool stuff you need to know about Worlds, my random thoughts, random facts that I found out, all about the winners, winning decks, etc. And then a little bit of analysis about that at the end. But we're going to start off with news and all that good stuff. Now, first of all, the competitor pack. It's something I like to have a quick word about. I wasn't at Worlds this year. I didn't get a competitors pack. But I know a lot of people wonder about those. Now, I don't know if I'm going to get everything here. I'm going to miss something. But the kind of stuff you got in there was obviously the playmat. There was a deck box. There was a DS screen wiper. There was a dice bag. There was a t-shirt. There was a little Pikachu plush. And maybe the coolest thing is that unlike the kind of souvenir-y kind of papery bags that we've had certainly 2 years ago, they were given in those little over-the-shoulder, little kind of canvas rucksacky kind of things, which were obviously decorated in the world's colours and all that, so that was pretty darn cool. So, competitors back quite good, and the promo, I believe I mentioned it before, but just in case I didn't, and actually I believe I didn't mention it, because the news literally came out the day after I put the podcast up last week, the promo was Champions Festival, the exact same promo as was given out at Worlds last year. That's the one which, if you've got a full bench, you may heal 10 damage from each of your Pokemon. Kinda cool, I suppose. It's not a stadium that's likely to see a huge amount of play. It's not a stadium that's seen a huge amount of play. Maybe with these fighting decks and decks doing less one-hit KOs, which seems to be the way we're going, it could see a little bit of play, but it hasn't in the past year. It's also interesting to note that in 2011 and 2012, Pokemon both years printed Tropical Beach as the World's promo. And then in 2013 and 2014, they twice printed Champions Festival as the World promo. So, I reckon there is a decent chance that the next 2 years we'll get the same promo. So again, all I'm doing is kind of drawing on trends here. I could obviously be very wrong about this, but I think it's a fair assumption to make that next year we'll get a new promo card. But in 2016, and I know I'm 2 years down the line here, maybe the podcast will have stopped by then, although I hope not. Maybe in 2016 we will again see a new, we'll see a new promo card coming out. Maybe, who knows. So, what have we got here? That was the promo card. Now, the thing which annoyed me this year, and it's not really anything I can comment too much on, but the announcer at World, I forget her name, somebody Brohard, I can't remember her name. The point is, she wasn't Nick McCord, and I love Nick McCord. When I went to Worlds in 2012, I heard stories about Nick McCord, how, oh my god man, the Worlds announcer, he's amazing, just you wait, this dude is a legend. And I'm not kidding, I must have heard a dozen or more people tell me how awesome the announcer was before I got to Worlds. And then I got to Worlds. And I saw Nick McCord. And I realised what they were talking about. He was amazing. He was just that right mix of lunatic enthusiast and entertainer and Pokemon knowledge man. He didn't know a huge amount about the card game. He didn't need to. Now, you will, for long-time listeners, remember that he actually did contribute a soundbite to the podcast a while ago. Now, that soundbite was on my old laptop, which died a not particularly dignified death. If I can drag out that old soundbite, I will start popping it in again, maybe soon. I might have to cut it out of an old podcast, although that should be possible, because I love Nick McCord, and he wasn't there. He just wasn't asked to be there. They went with somebody else. Now, whether they wanted an attractive lady because it's all streamed nowadays, certainly she was doing interviews of people around the venue, which was being put on the stream, which Nick McCord never did, as far as I'm aware. And, you know, she was objectively a very pretty lady, and blah, blah, blah. She wasn't Nick McCord. And I've seen a lot of people have the exact same reaction to me. I have heard nobody coming out saying, oh my god, this new lady, she was amazing. Every year, there were new people that had gone to Worlds for the first time went, oh my god, Nick McCord, oh my god, what a legend. It might sound like I'm a little bit in love with Nick McCord, and I am, in a purely platonic way. But I grabbed him coming out of the toilets, again, purely platonic love, to get a soundbite for my podcast, and he's just a lovely guy, and he was brilliant at what he did. I think, as well as my campaign to make sure we have at least one non-US commentator at Worlds next year, I think we need to put some effort into making sure that Nick McCord is back at Worlds next year. He deserves it, he should be, we need him. Now, while we're on a bit of a moan, and you know I like to give props for Pokemon for things they've done well, and call them out when they do things bad, I have another little moan here, and that is no Worlds announcement. It didn't say what Worlds is going to be. Now, it used to be that when you got your competitor pack with the promo cards in the 7 different languages, not Korean for those of you that are thinking so, if I can reel them off now, they're English, Japanese, French, Italian, Spanish, German and Portuguese, not Korean, you would get another card in there, and you always still have those cards, but the card used to say where Worlds was going to be next year. That's how the announcement was made in the promo cards. It was felt, I assume, that wasn't quite grandiose enough, so they got into the habit of ending the closing ceremony by going, see you next year in, and then saying where Worlds was going to be the following year, and sticking up a picture of said city. Lovely. Yeah, not this year. Truth be told, I don't blame them for this. The rumours I've heard, and to be honest, this is just what I assumed, I can't believe this isn't true. Pokemon have their people that go and find them locations. They have their routine. Pokemon almost certainly had a location sorted out. They knew exactly what they were going to do. They had it all sorted, and then it fell through. Probably due to nobody's fault, because that's the way business happens. And they're trying to find a replacement, or sort the original problem, or something. It is almost certainly a case of they had somewhere, they were ready to go, something fell through. These things happen. I don't think we can kill them for that. We'll find out soon enough, and you know that as soon as it's announced, I'll be sticking it on Twitter, and the Wednesday after the announcement, I'll be discussing on the podcast whether I think it's a good place or a bad place. What I'm saying is, I am now stating definitively that I will be at Worlds next year, wherever it is, so give me somewhere to be excited about. Nothing against Washington, D.C., especially as I'm a law and business guy, but Washington doesn't excite me. Hawaii excited me, San Diego would excite me. Give me a landmark destination. Give me somewhere that I'm going to tell my friends, and they are going to be jealous as all hell that I'm going. Now, one interesting thing that happened at Worlds this year was that the promo cards were being given out inside events. Not only that, but they were stamped promo cards, i.e. just the same as people were given in their competitors' packs. I believe, and someone correct me if I'm wrong here, that there were 8-man side events. You'd enter a little 8-man tournament. The winner of said tournament would be given a promo card along with a couple of packs. Some people got loads of these, some people got none of these. I suppose it depends how good a player you are. People not in Worlds thought this was a wonderful idea. It allows you to get your hand on a card which you wouldn't be able to get otherwise. People who had qualified for Worlds, however, thought this was a horrible idea. And there's 2 reasons for this. The reason that everybody said was, these promo cards are supposed to be exclusive. They are, amongst a bunch of other things, a reward for getting into Worlds, for qualifying. Now, don't get me wrong, there are other rewards, but the playmat you can buy in the shop. For instance, I wasn't at Worlds. I have a Worlds playmat. I don't have it in my hand yet, but I have a friend who's gone and got me a Worlds playmat because it's my birthday soon, and I like collecting playmats. Similarly, the Pikachu was for sale. Now, I believe that the shirts and hats, etc., are different colours, at least they were when I went there. So, although you can buy a World shirt, you can't buy a competitor shirt, and indeed I believe they have competitor written on the back. But the promo cards were always the coolest exclusive things, and by giving them out to other people who weren't competing at Worlds, you're almost devaluing it. Here's the thing people didn't say. We like to sell our promo cards, and the English one is worth more, because for those of you that don't know, the rule on foreign cards is you can use your home language. In Canada, you can use French. In Mexico, you can use Spanish. In Europe, because apparently Europe's all one country, we can use any European language. It is staggeringly inaccurate geographically, but it's wonderful in terms of getting cards. So I don't speak Italian, French, German, Portuguese and Spanish, but I can use all of those language cards when I play the Pokemon trading card game. It's ludicrous, it's lunacy. I should only be able to use English cards, because I'll tell you what, a lot more people speak Spanish in the USA than they do in England. But that's just the rules. And people like selling their cards. And the English cards, because, first of all, they're English, but also they're the only ones that people in the USA can use. As I've said, Canada gets French, Mexico gets Spanish, making those ones also slightly more valuable. Same way with German, they've got such a big player base that the German cards become a little bit more valuable. Sorry, other languages. And the Japanese ones get very valuable if they're playable, because they're even harder to get because less Japanese people go to Worlds. But the fact of the matter is, people like selling these. The English ones are the most valuable, and by giving out a bunch of extra ones inside tournament, and they didn't last a whole weekend, they did run out. Not everyone who won an 8-man pod got one. But by giving them out at these side events, what you're basically doing is making them less rare, less desirable, and you're decreasing the value. And to be fair, Worlds is an expensive venture, and a lot of people that qualify for Worlds do end up selling the majority of their player kit, competitors' kit, in order to finance their trip to Worlds, or at least to part finance it. So you can kind of see where they're going here. So, there we go. Now, let's say some good things about Worlds. It was a very well-run event, and the stream was fantastic. There's still one commentator I don't like. Let's face it. Karl Sukovic, Puka, he founded the Top Cut. He does a lot of YouTube videos. He has earned the right to be there. Jose Quimzarjano, sorry about the pronunciation, again, not quite to the same level, but he's helped out with the Top Cut. He deserves to be there. J-Wits, first of all, he got 5th at Worlds in 2011, I believe it was, but also he's had his YouTube channel, and he's a bit of an internet celebrity, and he knows Pokemon. He deserves to be there. Dylan Exabyte Mayo works for the Pokemon Company, makes many mistakes, but the thing which I like least about his commentary, he doesn't see the subtle plays. When you watch people like, especially Puka, who is ridiculously knowledgeable about the game, he can sit there watching a game as with a player's mind, and he can guess what the people are going to do. And the J-Wits and Crims do this a little bit as well, not quite to the same level as Kyle, nobody does, but still to a pretty good level. You sit there, and Kyle does at least, Puka, and he sees what's going to happen, and he predicts what they're going to do. Dylan just kind of sounds like he's read a book. He sounds like someone who's read a book about it, or seen other people play. He doesn't sound like a man who plays, which disappoints me. But like I said, I still have an issue with having 4 US commentators at Worlds. That grates on me. So anyway, commentators, with one exception, did a fantastic job, a better job than the US Nationals. They looked more comfortable, they made less mistakes. It was just fantastic. The stream held up, the quality was fine. I sat in bed on Saturday evening with my girlfriend sleeping while I sat there and watched people play Pokemon in Washington DC on a really good quality stream with quality commentating. That was fantastic. So a lot of good things done there, and it seemed like another really well-run World. It seemed really good. Now, let's start off with the Grinder. Before we get into the main event proper, have a talk about the Grinder. Anyone who's listened to this podcast more than 5 minutes knows my affection towards the Grinder. I love the Grinder. Mainly because I got through the Grinder, but to be honest, my greatest memory of the Grinder is how lovely everyone was. Worlds, to me, the competition was disappointing because everyone took it way too seriously. Grinder was amazing. No one really expected to get through, so everyone was just happy. I mean, when they lost, they were a bit upset, as you would be, but they were happy. So, the Grinder. Firstly, commiserations to Jason Lindsay, friend of the podcast, who made it all the way to the top 16, 2 games away from making it into Worlds with Pyro. Commiserations, sir. I was cheering for you. I was so excited when I saw he'd made top 16, so gutted when he fell. Now, if you want to know what I thought about the grinder, go back 2 podcasts. I went through it in a lot of detail. What's interesting is no big basics made it through the grinder. But looking at the decks that did make it through, I'm not exactly sure. Here are the 4 people that made it in. Hokuto Tsubasa from Japan with Aromatisse Tex. He played an Aromatisse deck, and he made it. And again, my pronunciations of foreign names are not always particularly great. I can only apologise. He made it through with Aromatisse, and that's pretty cool, to be honest. I like that. It's not a deck. I don't know how comfortable I would be going through the whole of the grinder with Aromatisse, but clearly if you tech it right and go through, it can be a good deck, and it was. As a side note, because he grinded in, he finished 109th with a record of 4 wins, 5 losses and no draws. Also grinding in was Jimmy McClure from the US. Now, he grinded in with Evil Tau Garbodor. Again, a deck which I said it's one of those decks, and I think I said this on the podcast, it wasn't a deck that I recommended, but it's one of those decks where it kind of seems to have 50-50 matchups and a few bad ones, yet people who are really good with the deck win, even when they shouldn't, and he showed that by getting all the way through the grinder. Unfortunately, he didn't even finish all 9 games in the real world. Won 2, lost 5, and dropped. So kind of unfinished, if you will. And I don't really get that. He's gone all the way through the grind, and I suppose, to be fair, there were, I think, 7 rounds of the grinder on, there were 7 rounds of the grinder on the Friday, so I suppose by this point he's played 14 rounds of Pokemon. But you've got all the way into Worlds. I didn't do well at Worlds, and I still played out all of my games, but there we go. The third person that grinded in, although obviously there's no actual kind of list here, Jonathan Arias from the US, who went in, and this is amazing, Weavile, Lopunny, Execute. How cool is that? Somebody actually grinded in with Weavile, Execute. I didn't see this coming. I honestly did not see this coming. It's got a terrible Garbodor match if you can't hit your Lysandras and catchers, because Garbodor shuts the deck down entirely. It's got a horrific truly horrific big basics matchup, in that once a Landorus comes out, you lose really quickly. And it's a deck that can go wrong and can lose quick games, but it's another one that people have proven can be good. And to get through the grinder, you've got to be good. You've got to be lucky, but you've also got to be good, and he got all the way through. Ended up finishing with a record of 4 wins, 4 losses, 1 draw, which was good enough for 90th place. This was out of 231, mind you, so 90th, pretty gosh darn good. And the final person who grinded in was Tomoya Watanabe from Japan. Again, apologies for the pronunciation. Who grinded in with Virizion Genesect Raichu. And as we're going to talk about as we go through this podcast, Virizion Genesect really was the deck of the tournament. He basically hoped there would be no Pyrrole there, or that they'd be played by bad people, etc., and he'd be able to get a win. He was right. He got all the way through. Not only did he get all the way through the grinder, he actually finished Swiss with a record of 8-1 to finish as the top seed. In 2 days, he played 16 games of Pokemon, finishing with a record of 15-1, which is just crazy good. So congratulations to that chap. We'll talk about top 8 in a minute. So congratulations to him, a truly excellent result. So they're the 4 people that grinded in. We had 1 Virizion Genesect, 1 Weavile, 1 Evil Tau, and 1 Aromatisse. I didn't see Aromatisse or Weavile coming. Virizion and Evil Tau, as I said, they were contenders. They were decks that were worth playing. Having said that, I picked Big Basics over Evil Tau Garbodor. I picked Big Basics over Weavile. Maybe not Virizion Genesect, and who knows about Aromatisse. So, we had 231 Masters. And a top 8. Which is ridiculous. 231 Masters. top 8. That's just crazy. Now, what that meant was that the cut-off for top 8 ended up being, well, guaranteed in was 7 wins, 2 losses, 21 points. There were 2 people, Andrew Estrada from Canada and Gonzalo Pereira, I believe. I could be wrong about that. The name's all screwed up on the Pokémon website. Who grinded in with a record of 6 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws for 20 points. But there were 5 people, Ryan Morehouse of the UK, Haedon Young of Korea, Mia Violet of the US, Stian Nielsen of Norway, and Daniel Altavia, friend of the podcast, of the US, who ended up going 6-1-2, getting 20 points and whiffing. If you really want to go that pedantic, Andrew Estrada was the 8th seed with an opponent's win percentage of 60.8, and the top one that didn't get in was Daniel Altavia, who was the 9th seed with an opponent's win percentage of 53.95%. So, disappointing that really 7-2 had to get you in, and that 6-1-2, 6 wins, 1 loss, 2 draws in 9 games at World against World quality players isn't necessarily enough to get you into top 8. Clearly crazy. However, if we got to top 16, then that means that all of the 6-2-1s get in, except for Isaac Salazar of, I believe, the Czech Republic, I could be wrong, and Mathieu Cornillon from France, who would have whiffed. So, I don't know. Regardless, very, very good players. As an interesting note, Takuya Yaneda of Japan, I believe a former world champion, actually managed to go undefeated with a record of 5 wins and 4 draws, but only managed to come out 19th. Which I suppose is a little bit disappointing. I believe the lowest ranked undefeated player, the other person to go undefeated in Swiss, was Michikazu Suda, also from Japan, with 7 wins and 2 draws. So, that was... so your top 8 ended up being Igor Costa of Portugal, Andrew Estrada of Canada, Michikazu Suda of Japan, Paulo Silva of Portugal, Tomoya Watanabe of Japan, Chase Maloney of Canada, Vincent Azolin of France, and Gonzalo Pereira of Portugal. And the decks were very interesting here. We had 5 Virizion Genesect, we had 1 Eviltal Garbodor, we had 1 Plasma, and I'm just going to go and look up and see what the last deck was. It was Mega Kangaskhan Aromatisse, which is a pretty fun deck to take all the way to. It was actually top 4. So, we had, I believe, Tomoya Watanabe's Virizion Genesect losing to Andrew Estrada's Virizion Genesect, Chase Maloney's Eviltal Garbodor losing to Paulo Silva's Virizion Genesect, Igor Costa's Virizion Genesect beating out Vincent Azolin's, I believe, Plasma, and Gonzalo Pereira's Virizion Genesect losing to Michikazu Suda's Aromatisse Kangaskhan. In top 4, Andrew Estrada's Virizion Genesect beat Paulo Silva's Virizion Genesect, and Igor Costa's Virizion Genesect beat Michikazu Suda's Aromatisse Kangaskhan. And in the final, Andrew Estrada of Canada beat 2012 world champion Igor Costa of Portugal's Virizion Genesect, which actually makes me realise that Andrew Estrada just played Genesect in top 8. So apparently quite good in the mirror. And those decks are actually up in their entirety on the Pokemon.com. Oh, sorry, Pokémon World Championships.com. So if you want to check out those deck lists, I'm not going to just go through them here. Go through and have a look over there, please. So, a lot of Virizion Genesect. Now, one thing that interested me was the number of people dropping. Now, I had a look through, and the earliest master to drop, I don't want to drop anyone in it, pun intended, but the earliest master to drop was Mies Breckenmeyer of the Netherlands, who lost his first 2 games and dropped. Now, interestingly enough, every 7-2 made it. Now, not many people went 7-2. It was Chase Maloney and Vincent Azzelin. Both went 7-2. Both made top cut. 7-2 was enough to guarantee top cut. Now, I know it's obviously fairly, and there may be other reasons for dropping which I don't know of. Let me make that very clear right now. But essentially, he dropped when, and I know it's difficult, but winning 7 games in a row got him into top 8. And let's face it, people won 7 games in a row to get into Worlds through the grinder, so why wouldn't you win? Well, why couldn't you win 7 games in Worlds? Okay, higher competition. Shush. The point is, it was possible, and if you lose the first couple of games, then you're not up at the top tables, you're at the bottom tables with the people whose decks aren't running well, or have made bad metagame calls, or whatever. We also had people dropping like Alex Silva of Brazil, who dropped to 0-2-1. And admittedly, 0-2-1 isn't enough to actually get you into World proper. But there should be championship points for top 16, top 32. And there were plenty of people dropping when they could have got championship points. Evan Baker of the US and Henry Pryor of the US both dropped at 0-2-2. Where they could have ended up 5-2-2. And 5-2-2 would have put them potentially up into the top 32, definitely up into the top 64. And that would give them valuable Worlds points for next year. Maybe they didn't want Worlds points for next year, maybe they were feeling ill, who knows? But don't drop after 2 games at Worlds. You play your whole, the whole season to try and get into Worlds. And then you get there, you play 2 games and quit, when you actually were still, with a very slim chance admittedly, but still on for cut. Maybe it's just me, but I wouldn't have quit at that stage. But that's just me. Maybe, if in the incredibly unrealistic event of me qualifying for Worlds next year, we can go through and see how long I last when I start losing. So yeah, the dropping seemed a little bit weird. So, that's Worlds. That's how it went. We should have a quick look at the other age groups. In juniors, we saw an absolute dominance of Japan. By which I mean, the top 4 were Hitoshi Omura, Takashi Ugani, Hiroto Kobayashi, and Yui Kazakai. I'm bad at this. All from Japan. Now, the top 8 was also featuring Yugo Sato of Japan, Brady Guy of the US, and Rafael Lazari of Brazil. And Mizuki Yanagida from Japan, i.e. 6 of the top 8 juniors were from Japan. Now I believe, and please somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this, I believe in Japan seniors and juniors actually play together in the same age group. Ergo, juniors in Japan are used to playing against what we would consider seniors. So when you get juniors from the US and Europe, etc., playing against effectively seniors in terms of skill level, it's not hard to realise why these juniors may in fact have been quite a bit better. And in the final, Haruto Kobayashi's Plasma deck beats what seemed to be a Mewtwo Yveltal Garbodor deck piloted by Takashi Ugani. Now, to be fair, that's what we'd expect as juniors decks. We don't expect to see them coming out with really complicated stuff. Fairly simple, fairly straightforward. And Plasma should beat Mewtwo, Garbodor, Darkrai. I saw the final on stream, and it was very much, I'm going to put a Mewtwo, okay, I kill that with Deoxys. I'm going to put an Yveltal, okay, I kill that with Thundurus, etc. In seniors, we saw a very different way round, in that the top 8 was Kotstrike of the US, Trent Orndorff of the US, Ishan Jagiasi, the US Seniors National Champion, Cal Connor of the US, Jeffrey Chung of the US, Grant Manley of the US, Xander Pero of the US, and Alex Croston. Can you guess where he was from? It was the USA. The entirety of the top 8 was seniors. And in the final, Alex Croxton's Blastoise list fell to Trent Orndorff's Trevenant Excelgor Dusknoir. And how beautiful is it that Trevenant Excelgor Dusknoir won Worlds. It was in the senior division, but I don't care. That was still amazing. Now, I didn't get to watch all of this game on stream, so I had to drive somewhere to make sure I didn't miss the final on stream of the Masters. But from what I saw, game one, Trent just set up and the other guy couldn't, and it's kind of the way it goes. If you set up before they get a Blastoise, you win. Now, Alex was playing a single War Turtle to try and get that Blastoise out under lock. Now, and it's a big if, because I believe he only played 8 Water Energy, but if Alex can get out a Blastoise and 2 Caldeo, each with 3 Water Energy, you're just taking prize after prize and winning, because you're knocking out all those Trevenants. If, however, Trent gets a Trevenant up before Alex can get a Blastoise, it's pretty much over. Because you have to draw into those energy. You can't use Superior Energy Retrieval to get them out of the discard or even get them back until you've killed all of the Trevenant. Unless you kill all the Trevenant. And you can't use things like Professor's Letter to get the energy out in the first place. So, not a surprising result there. Now, interestingly, in the Masters division, you may have picked this up when I went through it the first time, you may not a single US Master made it into the top 8. Now, I haven't run the numbers on how many US players were there, but the general rule of thumb is that there are far more US players than any other individual country. What was interesting was that Portugal actually represented 3 people in the top 8 and 2 people in the top 4. Unfortunately, it went that well. It was literally 3 in the top 8, 2 in the top 4, 1 in the final, and none of them won. So one Portuguese chap fell every round. But it was still impressive for such a small European country with a fairly small player base to put 3 players into the top 8 of, I think we can all agree, the most brutal world so far. The question you got to ask, though, is, would this have been better with a top 16? And the answer is yes. We saw people like Mia Violet, who played on stream with a Dust Noir Darkrai Eviltal deck, and that was a lovely deck. She drew with Andrew Estrada in the final round of Swiss on stream, and Andrew managed to squeak in to cut at 8th place, and Mia missed it, but a top 16 she would have got in. Having only a top 8 is silly. Now, I know, well, Pokemon did say it's top 8 or nothing. You can do a second Swiss with the top 32, but you can't do anything else. And they didn't want to do a top 32. I mean, they didn't have time for 5 extra rounds. You saw how the weekend went. There just wasn't the time for it. Especially because they want to do all the stuff on stream, and they want the finals quite early on Sunday, and they want them on stream, etc. Fair dues. But at least give us a top 16, or even better, a proper top 32. If we do a proper top 32, by which I mean kind of single knockout, we see people like Ryan Morehouse, who may just be the best UK player around despite just aging up this year. We see people like Ross Cawthorn go in. We see people like Takuya Yaneda making it in. Israel Sosa, who's made a lot of noise recently, at least this past season. So we see some really good players, and then we see people like Daniel Oldavia, who I was personally cheering for as a chap who I know has listened to the podcast in the past. People like Stian Nielsen from Norway, who I saw at ECC and was a lovely chap, etc. It's just top 8 seemed a little anticlimactic, especially when there were 5, and contrary to reports, I believe there was 1 Plasma, 1 Aromatisse, and 1 Eviltal, so there were 5 Virgin, not 6. But 5 Virgin, and by the time we get down to top 4, there's, I believe, 3 Virizion Genesect, and by the time we get to the final, it's a mirror match. That's quite crazy, to be honest with you. A lot of Virizion Genesect. So why did Virizion Genesect do so well at Worlds? It's very simple, ladies and gentlemen. It's what I've been talking about for a little while now. I'm going to use the example I gave when I spoke to both Mao and Charlie Powell when I interviewed them prior to Worlds on this very podcast. I spoke to them and we were talking about last World, where they both played Kling Clang and pretty much sauntered into top 32, when there was a top 32. And the reason was very simple. When it came round to Nationals, Gothitelle was, quite frankly, it was a contender. It was doing very well. Lots of people were playing it. It was winning. And the reason it was winning, nobody was prepared for it. Darkrai lists weren't playing enough Caldeo. Blastoise weren't playing enough War Turtle, etc. And Gothitelle absolutely destroyed Klinklang. So with Gothitelle doing so well, Klinklang all of a sudden became a really, really bad play. But then by the time Worlds comes around, everyone's teching for Gothitelle. Blastoise list, Gothitelle was blocking trainers. It was very much like Trent's list that won Worlds this year, in seniors, except it was Stage 2 Gothitelle instead of Stage 1 Trevenant. All of a sudden, everyone's putting Wartortle into their Blastoise lists. So they can get Blastoise out. Maybe 2 Wartortle. Everyone's putting 2 or even 3 Caldeo into their Darkrai list, so they can just kind of double rush in and then retreat using Darkrai's Dark Cloak ability. And people are playing decks that beat it, and then all of a sudden Gothitelle becomes terrible. But nobody's teching for Klinklang anymore. So you've got all these big EX decks which are teching against Gothitelle, and then Klinklang comes in and has a really easy time of it. Same thing this year. Now, I like to think that a lot of the people who did well with Virgin at Worlds were people who'd seen the results of the grinder. What happened in the grinder? No Pyro. No Pyro made it through the grinder. I believe the top ranking one was actually friend of the podcast Jason Lindsay, who made top 16 with it before losing to the Weavile, which actually managed to grind in, piloted by Jonathan Arias, or Arias, or however you pronounce it. Sorry, sir. So, all of a sudden, now if you remember what I was talking about the last 2 weeks, Virizion and Genesect only really had one bad match. It was quite good against Evil Town Garbodor, not an audit win, but quite good. It was pretty darn good against Big Basics. It went about 50-50 with Plasma. The only real downside, and it was really good against Aromatisse, which apparently was everywhere, both in the grinder and in Worlds. And the good thing about Virizion and Genesect is the only really terrible matchup was Pyro. But with Pyro seeing a huge dip in play, or other decks countering it, Virizion and Genesect becomes good again. A lot of people weren't prepared for Pyro at US Nationals. It did well, so all of a sudden people are prepared for it. They play Stage 1s and Stage 2s to counter it, or they come out and play, decks which are good against it, or have water Pokemon, or whatever. Or they play more Big Basics. Big Basics takes down Pyro, but Virgin takes down Big Basics. Now, to be fair, both the finalists, Igor Costa and Andrew Estrada, did say on the stream, on the interview, that they had played against a Pyro deck and won at Worlds. But the fact of the matter is, when Pyro goes down, then the decks that lose to it do well, which actually made Plasma, as far as I'm concerned, a pretty good bet for the tournament, as long as you could play against Virizion and Genesect. And the crazy thing is, it would actually might have been worth, for the first time ever, playing Heatran EX in Plasma, or even something like Spiritomb, to stop Virizion and Genesect. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty much Worlds. Now, I have been in touch with Mark Levy. So, he is a good chap who lives in Canada, friend of the podcast, tweets quite a bit. He is friend of Andrew Estrada, who has managed to apparently get me an interview with Andrew Estrada. Now, unfortunately, it's not going to be done in time for this week's podcast, because I've got to go out and continue stripping wallpaper in a minute, so I'm going to get the podcast up before I go. But what I am going to be able to do is hopefully get an interview with Andrew Estrada tonight or tomorrow or sometime in the next week, and be able to get that for you on next week's podcast. An interview with the current world champion. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. I have connections. Not only that, but because I'm not grabbing him for 2 seconds at Worlds, yes, it's over Skype and the quality won't be the best, but it means I can actually do a proper interview, not a 5 second. How did this make you feel? How did this make you feel? How did this make you feel? So, we are going to be going through that next week. Next week we'll also be doing our With Hindsight look at Furious Fists before we get properly into the new decks and the new format starting in maybe next week, maybe 2 weeks' time. So look out for the interview with Andrew Estrada next week. I'm looking forward to it, and you should be too. Any questions, comments, queries or quibbles, tweet me at the Wassy, email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk, or if you're listening on YouTube, SoundCloud, etc., just leave a comment down below. I shall see it and get to it in due course. As always, thank you very much for listening. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.